Welcome, everyone, to Fairfield County Talks Housing, a program of the Fairfield County Center for Housing Opportunity. Thank you all for joining our conversation today, preview to the 2025 legislative session. I'm Evonne Klein, founder of Fairfield County Talks Housing. I'll be your moderator today. For folks who are new here, this program provides fact-based conversations with experts and leaders in the fields of housing, affordable housing, and zoning. And before we begin our conversation today, I would like to mention a couple of housekeeping items. And the first is live translation is available for today's webinar. To activate the translation function, go to the bottom of your screen, click on the globe, and select your language.
Bienvenidos todos a el programa de el condado de Fairfield habla sobre vivienda, un programa del Centro del Condado de Fairfield para la oportunidad de la vivienda. Soy Evonne Klein, fundadora de Fairfield County Talks Housing. Para las personas que son nuevas aquí, este programa provee conversaciones basadas en hechos con expertos y líderes en los campos de la vivienda asequible y la zonificación. Gracias por unirse a nuestra conversación de hoy. Antes de comenzarla, vamos a explicar un poco sobre el sistema de interpretación simultánea que tendremos disponible el día de hoy. Hoy estaremos practicando la justicia del lenguaje utilizando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Una vez la función sea encendida, va a haber un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice interpretación. Hace clic en el globo y selecciona su idioma, inglés o español. Puede también poner en silencio el audio original. Si se está uniendo a nosotros de un teléfono celular o tableta, no va a ver este globo aparecer. Sin embargo, va a aparecer la opción de interpretación de idiomas en el menú desplegable donde están los tres puntitos que dicen More o más. Puede poner en silencio el audio original y luego tiene que apretar finalizar o done para asegurarse que esté en el canal correcto. We will be practicing language justice by providing simultaneous interpretation using the Zoom interpretation feature. Once the interpretation feature is turned on, you will see a globe appear at the bottom of your screen. You will click on that globe and choose your language, English or Spanish, and you may mute original audio. If you're joining us from a cell phone or tablet, you will not see that globe. Instead, the option for language interpretation will appear from the drop-down menu in the three dots that say More. Once interpretation is turned on, you pick interpretation, choose your language, and then you can mute original audio. If you're joining us from cell phone or tablet, you have to click Done to make sure you're in the right room. Thank you. Emma, you can turn off interpretation.
Great, thank you so much. So anyone in our audience, if you have a question, please enter your question in the Q&A function, and we will get to as many questions as possible after our moderated conversation. I'd like to welcome our panelists today, Senator Mendi Rahman, co-chair of the Planning and Development Committee, Senator Marx, newly appointed co-chair of the Housing Committee. We're happy to have you. And we are waiting for Senate Majority Leader Bob Duff. Today, we are also fortunate to have with us the CEO of Fairfield County's Community Foundation, Mendi Paca, who will set the stage for today's conversation. Mendi.
Thank you, Evonne. I'm delighted to be here again this year to kick off this really incredibly important conversation for both our region and our state. So as you said, I'd just like to share a few words that I hope can help orient our conversation. I think most of us would agree that housing is fundamental to the overall health of a community. We know that when people can readily access housing, it sets the stage for a vibrant community. It makes it easier for us to put down roots and to support our neighbors. It makes it easier for businesses to find and keep productive, skilled workers. And it makes it easier for children in our community to learn and thrive. It also means that older residents can continue to enjoy the community that they call home. Unfortunately, when good housing is scarce, too expensive, it creates the opposite conditions. And we are, in fact, in our region experiencing many of those conditions. The lack of quality, affordable housing triggers a host of challenges that create a crisis for some, but negatively impact quality of life for all of us. And I think it's really important for us to keep that fact in mind. And sadly, while there is much to celebrate about our community here in Fairfield County, the fact is our region ranks last in Connecticut on most key measures of affordable housing. And in fact, we're not just the worst in the state, but we are among the worst in the nation when it comes to affordable housing measures. Fairfield County is the most expensive housing market in the state and the most residentially segregated by both income and race. Here in Fairfield County and statewide, these conditions are leading to a dramatic rise in homelessness. The state's most recent point in time count of those experiencing homelessness has increased for 3 straight years. And I will note that we don't have to take that as a given. I can recall really only about a handful of years ago, a little more than that, when we had almost resolved chronic homelessness in our county. And now we are in a place where we are experiencing that dramatic rise. And this is at a time when there is so much uncertainty at the federal level. And when we know that there are sharp cuts likely coming to parts of our social safety net. We may not know exactly which, but we can reasonably predict that they are coming. And because of that, it's even more important that we take matters into our own hands here to address Fairfield County's housing crisis. And make no mistake, we cannot expect this situation to change unless we take action right now. The time to just casually observe this condition or to wait and see has passed. The good news is that we have some great organizations and people who are working locally to address our housing challenges. I've seen many of them signing up for the call as I've been looking at the participant list. And we also have some dedicated state officials, some of whom are joining us today, who are pushing for change. And because of organizations like Fairfield County Center for Housing Opportunity, which is a coalition the Community Foundation co-created and remains actively engaged in, we now have a leading regional advocate for affordable housing development. Through partnerships like Open Doors Fairfield County, another group we fund at the Community Foundation, more than 150 nonprofits and other leaders are working to end homelessness in our county, once again, with the goal of ensuring that everyone in our area can have a home they can afford and that they can live in safely. And because of ongoing advocacy and education, towns and cities across Fairfield County are working on their affordable housing plans, and in some cases, taking steps to implement them. We are beginning to show what's possible when smart investments in affordable housing happen. Nearly 20 years ago, Fairfield County's Community Foundation partnered with others to start the Fairfield County Collaborative Fund for Affordable Housing. And I prefer to look forward, but I do want to take a step back just for a second to tell folks what that collaborative looked like and what it was. So through a 10-year investment of nearly $5 million, the fund helped 5,000 people with low and middle incomes, created nearly 1,400 jobs, and generated $472 million in economic activity in our region. We proved with that type of a collaborative effort that when individuals and elected officials and others come together, it does benefit our economy as a whole. And these types of transformational cross-sector efforts are once again needed. That's why it's worth taking a look back at where we've been, what we have accomplished in the past, and fueling ourselves to do something of that scale again. Today, the Community Foundation grants more than $500,000 annually to organizations working to ensure that all Fairfield County residents have safe, stable, and affordable housing and communities of opportunity. But the truth is, only a fraction of that money makes up the dedicated resources that we really need to tackle this challenge. It's frankly a drop in the bucket. That's why I'm excited to be able to welcome you to today's webinar and to hear from some of the voices in state government who are joining us in putting housing front and center. At the Community Foundation, we are proud of the investments and the great work of our community-based partners. But we cannot solve this problem without smart public policy, and I really, really want to stress that. And without elected officials who are willing to take a stand for their hardworking constituents, and without engagement from the private sector as well. So what's ahead? A challenge this complex requires multifaceted solutions. And as we begin the legislative session this year, we do have a lot of work to do. Fairfield County's Community Foundation has been advocating for several measures that would move the needle on housing in Fairfield County and statewide. We've championed Work, Live, Ride, which aims to encourage more housing near Connecticut train and bus stations. And the House passed this bill last year, but the Senate ran out of time to consider it. So that actually sets the stage for the bill to be taken up in both chambers this winter. It's also time to push forward legislation that expands just cause eviction protections and increase the funding for the state's rental assistance program. And it's past time to create more inclusionary zoning across our state in every community. We must take bold and decisive action to make housing accessible and affordable to everyone who calls Fairfield County and Connecticut home. We stand ready to support this effort at the Community Foundation and to provide information and resources and help to expand housing opportunity in our state. We know that our business community needs to attract more talent, but they struggle to do so because they cannot find enough employees who can frankly afford to live here. And we are pricing young people out and retirees on fixed income. And so therefore, we do need everyone to be vocal and consistent champions for housing. We need to stand up for the needs of the majority instead of the vocal few who believe that they will actually benefit from the gridlock and NIMBYism. And I say believe because I don't actually think they will, because this is in fact an issue of our collective well-being and the legacy we will leave for future generations. This is also an issue of economic sustainability for Connecticut. What we do or don't do this year in housing will in many ways determine whether our children and our grandchildren will be able to stay here, to live here, to thrive here. And I do believe that now is the time and an opportunity to fully commit to solving this crisis. And I think that if we get this right, which we have the opportunity to do, we will indeed have a brighter future for all. And I really have belief and faith in everyone on this call and everyone who will participate in this conversation today, that together that is something we can do. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Evonne, and I look forward to hearing from our elected officials how they are thinking about these really important issues.
Thank you so much, Mendi, for those thoughtful opening remarks. And I would like to thank all the senators on this call today. I know it's a busy time, session just started, so there's a lot of activity up in Hartford, and I know your time is precious. So Senator Duff, welcome. It's good to see you here today. Now, as I just mentioned, it's early in the session, and we're hearing and we're reading about priorities and for this year. So where is housing on the list of priorities? And if you could talk a little bit about, maybe what your top housing priorities might be for this session, and which constituencies you're thinking of during this session.
Yeah, well, thank you, Evonne, and my apologies to everybody for being late. We had a press conference that went a little long on environmental issues and children's issues, and then we got a bunch of questions. So thanks everybody for hanging in there. I will just say this to start off. I appreciate Mendi, her advocacy. I appreciate your advocacy over the years, Evonne, and I'm so pleased and proud to be here with Senator Marx and Senator Mendi Rahman, who are both champions of more housing. In our caucus, in the Senate Democratic Caucus, we are going to make sure that we continue to push housing as best we can, as much as we can, and really try to move the needle. Representative Rojas and I have had the majority leaders roundtable on housing, which I think has been very helpful because over the last 3 years, we've been able to get housing legislation through each of those years. So some of it has been more incremental than we'd like, but still in all, it's I think helped push the needle, and it's kept the conversation going, so that where we are today, I think, is way more than we would have been, say, in the past, had we not done these. And I know that Senator Marx and I know that Senator Rahman are going to continue to push hard on a lot of pieces of legislation. I think for us here in Connecticut, what we've got to do is we need to make sure that we are building housing. It's a supply and demand issue. And frankly, by not building more housing, we are holding our economy back. I think of Senator Marx's area where Electric Boat is looking to hire, tens of thousands of people, and they don't have enough housing. She talks about it all the time in a very personal level of her own occupation outside the Capitol and what she sees, and frankly, how it actually can revitalize areas and what it's doing to downtown Groton by having more housing. And I know Senator Rahman feels the same way. He's a business person. He hires people. He needs to make sure that there's housing for the folks he hires. And us here in Fairfield County, we have to do the same thing. There's just, I talk about the fact that my son graduated college last year. He's making a good salary as somebody who just graduated college, but unlike me or you or maybe other people, can't find housing even with a good starting salary. And so he's living at home with his parents, which is fine, but I don't want him to live with us forever, and I'm sure he doesn't want to live with us forever. So we have to think about that. And the fact of the matter is that we have to build more supply. So I think what we're going to be looking at, Evonne, is I'd like to see us look at regulation reform, zoning reform, making sure we're putting enough money into housing. We have one of our priority caucus bills is dealing with housing, and Senator Marx can talk a little bit more about it, and Senator Rahman can as well. There's other bills out there, and some of these things are a little light on specifics right now because that's the way it is at the beginning of session. To suggest that it's light because we don't know yet is kind of untrue. It's light because we listen to the public, we listen to advocates, we listen to people who deal in these issues every single day, the tenants, the owners, and others. And I'd say homelessness is also a big part of the equation as well, because when you were housing commissioner, Evonne, you worked very hard with the Malloy administration to almost eliminate homelessness. We did a great job on chronic homelessness. We've done a great job on veterans homelessness, but we've slid backwards. Got to pick those pieces back up again. So that's where I am, and look forward to hearing from everybody else.
Great. Thank you so much. Senator Rahman, you're next. Zoning is always a tough and contentious issue, but addressing zoning is critical to creating more housing for all. And that's what the Planning and Development Committee deals with, zoning, among other things. Often there seems to be widespread misinformation and misunderstanding about where municipalities get their authority to zone, which is from the state. All of our 169 cities and towns can zone locally because the state has given them the authority to do so in the Zoning Enabling Act, Connecticut General Statute 8-2. So given this tension with respect to zoning, what do you think the prospects are for zoning reform this session?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank to the Fairfield County Talks Housing, and Evonne, thank you for putting this together. I'm thrilled to be here with my colleagues here. Majority Leader, this is his baby. He worked a lot, Majority Leader panel last 2 years. I was with him all about housing. These three things: housing. So zoning regulation. Look, we can talk all day, every day. We all know we need more housing, all area. Either if you're talking about the trans-oriented housing, shortest, workforce housing, shortest, and supporting houses, shortest. Of course, affordable housing we all talking about. So all is holding back because local planning and zoning. So if we remove some red tapes from the local zoning, thereby we are not hurting the town. We are not hurting. Also, we can fill the housing shortage also. Our developer, our builder, they can create more housing. But right now, 169 in town and city, not all the treating the builder or creating more housing their town. And another thing I want to add is this is why I introduced bill as of right and grandfather in converting from commercial property to residential property. Senate passed that bill last session, and again, House ran out the time. So I introduced the bill again. This bill coming back. Hopefully, we can go through this term and then creating more housing because there is a 169 town and city. In most town, you have the lot of office, empty. Those properties going to become a abandoned and blighted property. A town will lose collecting taxes, and also it's going to look bad. So we are trying to help the both side, property owner and also town. And same time, if they allow us to, convert, then we can create more housing. At least not going to be big, all the problem we can solve, but some portion of, is moving forward, creating more housing at least will. So I think the local zoning, planning and zoning is the big issue. If we can move some red tapes, of course, the zoning reform is very important. I think the bill coming again, this session, and we will work with, look, as a state senate member, our job to listen all our stockholders, but when you try to do something local level, reforming the zoning, and then maybe our local elected officials, mayors, or be a board of ed, or city councilor, they all come, hey, listen, this is not good for my town. So that's oftenly is a challenge. So, but how you're going to bring all the stockholder one place is taking care of this crisis. This is not like housing crisis in Connecticut and nationwide. But I get that part. But Connecticut should lead. We should not be far behind than some other state. So this is why I'm here, and I will continue fight, for creating more housing and work closely with my colleagues. And Senator, pretty good, and she put her heart and soul. And of course, Senator Duff, last 2 years I was his, majority leader panel, and how we can creating more housing. Continue was pushing us, and I will work hard at this session and see what we can do. Reform zoning, regulations, and most importantly, removing the some red tapes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. Senator Marx, congratulations, right? This is your first term as the Housing Committee co-chair. So, the question that I have, and I think others have, why Housing Committee? Why the Housing Committee of all the committees you could have really fought for and secured a spot on?
Thank you, Evonne, and thank you for having me. And so nice to be here with Senator Rahman and with Majority Leader Duff. I have a lot to learn, and they're great mentors. So I did ask for housing. The last 2 years, I was chair of Veterans and Military Affairs, but for the last 40 years, and I still am, a nurse. I guess probably the last 25 or 30, I don't know how long, I've been a visiting nurse. Now it's called a home care nurse. So I am in the housing stock of Southeastern Connecticut all the time. And housing affects every single person, right? If you're looking for a job, if you're losing your house, if you're older and you want to downsize, if you get sick and you can no longer stay in your home, housing issues affect everybody. And I see it firsthand how housing and public health are very interconnected. If you have a safe place to live, and if you're ill, a safe place to recuperate, you are going to have much better outcomes than if you don't have a safe a safe home. I go to the Homeless Hospitality Center here in New London often. We have respite rooms there where when the people that are sick and need their own room come to the Homeless Hospitality Center, they often have a home care nurse referral made. And I have watched people go from homelessness to getting a house. I've spent hours with them, and when you're caring for somebody in their home, it's the who's in control tends to shift a little, right? When you're at a doctor's office wearing a Johnny, sitting on an uncomfortable chair, they're kind of in control. When you're in someone's home sitting on their couch or their chair next to them, they are in control. So I know the stories, and that is the lens that I will use when I make decisions and when I decide priorities, because I truly know how hard life is for so many people in Connecticut. And it's not just Southeastern Connecticut. It's, I've gone from the very poor, right, to the very wealthy. I mean, I've been on Fenwick in Old Saybrook, and there's a lot of wealthy people in New London too. I see everything, and housing and housing concerns affect every person, even those that are middle income and upper middle income. So I asked to be on this committee because we're going backwards. We can just see with our homeless population numbers. And there's many reasons for that. I'm sure we'll get into some of that later on. But I really think that we have to be very bold and very urgent this session in trying to really pass some legislation that makes a difference. I don't know how we're going to do that. I'm ready to sit down with Senate Majority Leader Duff and the House Majority Leader Rojas and my co-chair, Rep. Felipe, who we're so far great working relationship. We both think the same and have a lot of the same priorities. So I just really want to make a difference, and housing is so important. And I'm learning a lot, meeting with all of the stakeholders, not only, the tenants unions and the representatives for the homeless community, but also the home builders and so many different stakeholders out there, and so many different ideas, CHFA, and there are some new ideas and some interesting things being discussed. I'm not sure they're ready for prime time yet, but I don't know. I think it's really exciting, a really exciting committee, and I'm ready to work really, really hard and to get some good legislation passed.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. I think, I know we get, there's a lot of attention, let me just say it this way, about the fiscal guardrails. And some folks are calling, out in the community, are calling the fiscal guardrails roadblocks. What impact do you think they will have on, for example, funding Connecticut's homeless response system, housing creation, and Connecticut's rental assistance program? Whoever I'm going to go to Senator Duff if you'd like to go first.
Thanks, Evonne. Was that about funding those programs, did you say?
Yes. So, folks are looking at the fiscal guardrails as
right.
being an impediment to funding certain programs. And I know the homeless response system has come in or will be coming in for a $33.5 million ask to fund their system. Clearly there's hundreds of millions of dollars annually for both housing creation and Connecticut's rental assistance program.
Yeah, well, I would, I just want to get clarification on that. So thank you. I would think that as I said earlier, we had almost solved, at least in Fairfield County, almost solved homelessness. And we've gone backwards, which is, it's always going to be a up and down kind of a thing. It's never static. But we know that there are great people working on the issue, and it whether it's government, non-governmental, folks who come together, advocates, it's a solvable problem, but it takes resources, and we know that we have to put the resources there to get it done. We never want to be in the same place as other states where they have homeless, I mean, literally all over the place. We are better than that, and we care for our people, so we should not allow it. So, and with housing being so expensive, there's so many people now spending over 50% of their income in housing that the RAP certificates, because I don't really expect anything more from the federal government on Section 8 vouchers. So we have to do more on the RAP certificates, which are Connecticut Section 8 vouchers. So a lot of these things, building housing, putting people in housing, housing security, that costs money. But again, if you think about what it costs, and we do this a lot, but it is true in this instance, having somebody who is homeless, unhoused, costs way more by putting them through a system that only just puts them back out on the streets again, rather than setting up with good supportive housing, good housing, wraparound services if needed. That's what is something that we need to keep our eye on.
Thank you. Senator Rahman or Senator Marx, did you want to chime in on that? And truly no pressure to do so if you wanted to add to that.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Evonne. Majority Leader pretty much explained pretty well. I just want to add, 2 weeks ago, we had a press conference, homelessness. One of my friends was joking. He said, homeless exist because the billionaire exists. So it's like joke he was saying, because obviously guardrail, 2017, they put in place, and I know the same complaint. A lot of people are asking, hey, you guys have enough, why not you shifting some fund you have for creating more housing or other in an area. So yeah, but point is, whatever we're doing, either you have the funding or whatever it is, sometimes we are fixing for just immediate fix, but not long-time solution, those stuff. A homeless not going to go anywhere unless we have the enough housing. Otherwise, every year or cold weather, we are all coming back, a press conference, all those asking 30 million, 20 million, whatever it is. But this is for like a immediate fix, am I right? This problem not solving for long run. In order to solve the long run, we have to creating more housing. That's the bottom line. So any grant or anything we ask for, we can shifting from all around, but it's more housing. That's the main key. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So Evonne, I would just say, I mean, definitely the 33 million for homelessness will be a priority of mine. We all know it's getting worse. One of the reasons why it is getting worse is because of the private equity firms, the out-of-state companies that are coming in and buying up our properties and raising the rents by amounts that are just impossible for those living on a fixed income to be able to pay. I see that we're going to have a lot more older people being homeless. We already see that. I'm going to be 62 in 2 weeks, and I can't imagine sleeping on a wrestling mat every night, because that's what our I go to the emergency overnight shelter. And if anybody had to sleep next to me, I snore and I would feel really sorry for them. Like, I just cannot imagine if in your 60s, like, I don't know, I get up 3 times a night to go to the bathroom, right? Like that you're lying in a big room on a mat. Just like, even think of it for one night, and what these what that must do to people. So we have to have ways that our goal obviously is to not ever have to have I call it the homeless hospitality center because that's what it's called in New London. But we should never have to have a homeless shelter, right? We should be able to have all of the supportive housing for people. And one of the most amazing privileges I've ever had, I said this before, but to know somebody who was in the shelter, to know their stories. There is always so much trauma behind so many people that end up being homeless, trauma that many of us hopefully don't know. Many of us probably do know, but people's stories are so unique and so hard. And then to see people that end up in permanent housing and small apartments that to them, it is the Taj Mahal. I mean, they are so happy to have their own place. And in New London, we just made a few houses where it's 4 apartments with shared kitchen, and that's where we're being able to send some of our unhoused people to houses like that, and it works. And you know, when you brought up zoning before, I think we have to try to change some of the tone of what we say. We call it the whole affordable housing. What is affordable housing, right? Affordable housing is for people even that have gone to college, new nurses, new teachers, new professional firefighters, new laborers at Electric Boat. It has a bad name to it, and it shouldn't. But then it's also the caretakers that are working as homemakers and companions, taking care of all of our loved ones, all of our elderly in the home, so that the elderly don't have to be in a nursing home, saving the state millions and millions of dollars. We just came out with a report about in the last 20 years, how many seniors were in nursing homes to how many there are now. And that's our goal, right? To have our elders age at home. But the people that are taking care of them, we all call them angels. They're not angels. They're people that are working really hard because they want to bring money home and they want to take care of themselves and their families. But they're not able to afford housing. And they're the people that are becoming unhoused. And that to me is not something that I should be proud of, living in Connecticut. There is something very, very fundamentally wrong with that. And so I think we have to try to change the narrative and try to make some of these towns, and I know I'm being just so like, people are probably laughing at me saying you haven't done this long enough, Martha, but we have to change the narrative, and every town should want to have this great diverse population living in their town because they add so much joy and culture and experience. So it's going to take a lot, but I do think we have to try to change the narrative, and we have to get off using affordable workhouse. I'm not sure what the right word is, but we should want everybody with all different kinds of professions living in our towns. And my town has that. I live in New London, and I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of that. I have 4 children. When I used to drive them to school, I would say that is our soup kitchen, that is our homeless hospitality center, and you should be so proud that you live in a town, a city that takes care of the least of their brothers. So that's my little preacher, I guess I have a hard time understanding why it's not happening, because it truly is the right thing for humanity to do.
Great. Thank you so much. And I would like to take this time to remind the folks in our audience, if you have any questions for our senators, please put them in the Q&A function so that we could spend a few minutes putting forward your questions to our senators who are with us today. Just a couple of things. because folks might be left hanging just a little bit about a definition of affordable housing. HUD does define affordable housing as if you are paying more than 30% of your income on your housing costs, you really are living in housing that you cannot afford. So just wanted to put that out there so people understand that. And,
Can I ask one question about
Sure.
that share of housing that I should know? Is that 30% of your gross or 30% of your net?
It's all of your housing costs, and I believe it is your net income.
Okay. So if you're putting money away for daycare or for retirement, that doesn't count. It's your net.
And you know, again, you know, when we think about our communities and housing people, you know, people of all incomes, you know, to everybody who made a point today, it's providing housing for people of all incomes. So again, I just want to put out there to our audience, please send in your questions. So, you know, this is for all of you, whoever would like to go first. So, you know, we're hearing rumblings this session of what, you know, is coming forward. Just cause eviction was something we heard a lot about and many of us supported last session. Work, live, ride. I believe that went through the House, not through the Senate. You know, we touched on this a little bit, proposals to increase funding for rental assistance in Connecticut, program known as RAPS. You know, we sort of hearing like you're going to be hearing from folks on these issues and more. So what are your initial thoughts on the prospects of these pieces of legislation going forward? New year, a lot of changes with respect to what we may be expecting on the federal level, anticipating that. And of course, you know, really tracking what's happening in housing in the state of Connecticut. So, you know, where do you think we're going? Do you have any feel for where you think we can be going on just cause eviction, work, live, ride, and any funding for housing or rental assistance? Whoever would like to go first.
I'm going to defer to the chairs of the committee.
Okay. I'll talk. I like to talk. I think just cause is huge. It will definitely be a priority of mine. It's where do we start? Do we start from where we left off with it last session? How do we adjust it so that we get, I mean, you know, it's counting the votes pretty much in the House because the Senate, I feel confident in the Senate often. Maybe that's also a freshman, you know, optimistic. I tend to be an optimist. But just cause is very important to me. Fully funding homelessness is also incredibly important to me. We get $98 million from the federal government for homelessness. So who knows what's going to happen, right? I fear this session that much of what we're going to do is end up having to play defense by what's happening in the federal government. And so right now on January 22nd, is that what it is? We have all of these great, you know, I feel like we're going to be able to pass some wonderful things in housing, and then boom, we're losing, you know, we start losing money from the federal government and everything's going to change, right? With transportation, with housing, with HUD, with homelessness. So right now, my priority would be just cause and ways to also increase the, there's some stuff with CHFA about, I want to try to increase, obviously, housing in the eastern part of the states. That's where I'm from. That's where my constituents are from. And that's where my voice will be always first and foremost. And then to try to get some other municipalities that don't want to engage in this, to try to show them the positive, what the positive effects it can have. So that's my priorities right now.
All right. Of course, my my colleagues explained very well. But this bill, last session I co-sponsored the bill, and but one thing we should not have even eviction, but a lot of things we should not have, but we still have it. Am I right? So 2023, 20,600 eviction, took in place, and out of over 20,000 is 11% people was evicted because expired lease. Although even there was maybe paying their rent on times, was no problem about there, but then evict them unnecessary. I read the bill a little bit. Landlord can evict you if you don't pay. Also late pay, rent, or you're disturbing the tenant, or illegal activity, all those stuff is in place in favoring the landlord, but then same time still they are evicting people, continue paying the rent. So I'm going to support this bill again, and as per the funding, all those stuff, we will continue work on supporting the community. Thank you.
Thanks, and to see why we have great chairs who are gonna lead on so many issues on this that are important. I feel Senator Rahman is, I know, working very hard on Live, Work, Ride with the House as well, and is, providing the Senate has good input on that. I feel very confident that we can get that through. And then Senator Marx talked about just cause. We had an amendment last year to the big housing bill that we filed, but we didn't call, but it was a good marker, which was on purpose, a good marker for where we're going to start with just cause. So I think we can get some of these things over the finish line. We're always optimistic. That's the great part about starting session, and then we'll continue to work on them. We know that people are counting on us, so we're going to do everything we can to get them across the finish line.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'd like to make a correction. I misspoke earlier. When there was Senator Marx asked about if it was gross income or net, I thought I said gross, and my apologies. It's 30% of your gross income. So again, my apologies on that. Let me see what we've got from our audience. I think so I think this question goes to Senator Rahman. How will you approach the intersection of cost / and availability of transportation and affordable housing?
Great question. Wow. I don't know who asked you this. As a probability of housing, when you talk about, first thing I want to mention that when we're talking about the affordable housing, people thinking totally something different, like low-income housing. We need to clean up that. There is no low-income housing anymore. Even if you go Hartford, it's pretty expensive, am I right, to live anywhere. Rent or buying the property state-wise, 169 town and cities. So, a couple of weeks ago, I received a phone call from Glastonbury. One of my constituent called his grandmother looking 2-bedroom apartment in Glastonbury, but look all over, couldn't find a 2-bedroom apartment. And but he explained me, grandmother had a 5-bedroom big home. She wanted to downsize, so she wanted to sell the property and buy the 2-bedroom. But it's not the question she has money or no, she can afford or no. But there is no property right now. Inventory is short so bad, doesn't matter, like I mentioned earlier, either supporting housing or trans-oriented or work, all right, whatever it is, all area housing shortage. Even though you have money, you can find the property to buy, desire your town you want to live, I mentioned previously my daughter at 12, few years she's gonna say, Mom and Dad, I want to stay close by you. can she afford $3,000, $3,500 one or two bedroom in Glastonbury? No way. All right. So it's when we're talking about the housing, we're talking about our young folks, seniors, working, families, everyone. So it doesn't matter, but people right now are thinking maybe low income housing. We need to clean up that. That's the main problem. As for the cost, of course, we are working on a continuum. You talk about the transportation and the cost savings, all those stuff. It's related so many things. We have to see how is the budget coming, what governor putting, and we're going to work closely with our leadership. I know Senator Duff is very good about, working on with us cost savings for our residents. Either you talk about the transportations or you talk about the utility bills or anything. And this is our first priority and our leadership priority. We are ready and eager to work on cost savings for Connecticut residents.
Great.
Yvonne, I
Gonna
can
go
give
back.
just a
Oh, I'm
quick-
sorry,
A quick
Senator.
example, because this was a number of years ago, that remember we did the Hartford to New Britain busway? And that was money that came in from the federal government because Florida rejected some federal money and Governor Malloy took it. And we ended up doing this busway. A lot of folks were opposed to it because they called it the busway to nowhere. And lo and behold, there's a lot of people actually use it rather than get on the highway. And what has been the kind of the secondary outcome by having this busway that gives people more opportunities to take mass transit into Hartford or New Britain? The byproduct of that has been a lot of housing that's been built in areas that traditionally had not seen housing built for decades. And you know this as well in your former job as commissioner. And maybe you can even talk about it as well if you wanted to, but a lot of this is investing in areas, downtown areas, mass transit areas. This is why Live, Work, Ride is important, because people want some easier commutes, and you can do that if you place housing in strategic areas, or you just have good mass transit, and sometimes the housing will pop up after that because that's you make those investments, and the private sector investments come along right after you make those public sector investments.
Great. Thank you so much. How can residents, and I think this is a good, sort of wrap up question, how can residents and advocates help educate and encourage legislators who are on the fence about, or even opposed to increasing housing supply or funding homelessness? So what can we do to help? And whoever would like to go first, Senator Marx.
I think there's very few senators that don't want to fund homelessness, really. And it's just whether or not we're going to be able to afford all that they need. So I don't think we have to worry that much with that, although I don't know that they're going to get $33 million. I think for all of the other issues, I'm sure that legislators hear all the time from the people that don't want housing in their towns or in their communities. You tend to hear from those that don't want a bill. You don't hear from those that want a bill. So I think sending your local legislators an email, not a chain email, but an own personal email, no more than 2 or 3 paragraphs long, because we get a lot of emails, but just, hey, you know what? I've lived here in so-and-so for 50 years and I love it. And I want my children to be able to live here. And right now they can't. And I was able to buy a house here 50 years ago on a teacher's salary. And look at all the teachers, that have lived here and what they did for this community. But unfortunately, the teachers that teach in our schools can no longer live in our town. And so I think they need to hear very personal stories and It doesn't take long to write an email and not a chain email, because believe me, we are all getting all of the negative emails, the people that don't want the bills. So that's really the best thing, because like when all of a sudden in one day you get 20 emails from people, with very kind stories, or you know what? Hey, I'm a 65-year-old that's still living in my 4-bedroom raised ranch, and I have to stay there because there's nowhere for me to downsize to. And I would love to have a young family live in this house, but I can't move anywhere else. Little stories like that, right? We all have a housing story. There's not one of us out there that does not have a housing story. So I think that's the best way.
Well, very simple to me. Call your local elected officials, talk with them, make sure they are looking the softer corner. We can create more housing. Talk about the local zonings. That's very important one. So, we have to start from the grassroots, start from the town and city, am I right? And of course, we, ask for $30 million and talk with the local, legislator. I'm sure our Senate member, they are ready. They are eager to work and support any way they can. And with our majority leader and Senate president, we are all ready to work, ready to help. But this is also, like I said, beginning, just is not long-term solution, it's a short-term solution. Every winter we are coming, asking 20, 30, whatever it is. But I think long-term solution working on creating more housing, that's the main key. So go to your local legislators and elected official, ask them, say, hey, this is what you guys need to do. You guys are the boss. We are here listening, am I right? And tell us what to do, and we're gonna, follow your direction. Thank you.
Thanks, and I'll just wrap that up by saying that it takes relationships. So constituency and have relationships with their legislators on issues, and not just only when something gets hot, but have a relationship all the time, and that really is important. The second thing is, I said this at the housing conference last fall, is that we need YIMBYs. We need YIMBYs at the Capitol. We need YIMBYs at planning and zoning meetings. We need YIMBYs all over. We hear from the NIMBYs all the time, and they're the ones who always say no, and they take up a lot of the airspace and the oxygen and everything else. But we know that more housing is supported by a large group of people in this state. We know that people want to be able to live in various communities. And we know that people support funding, and we know that people support zoning reform and regulatory reform. But we legislators need to hear that. So that's why it's important to gather those YIMBYs and also have the housing coalitions come in with a singular voice, to not come in with what I see all the time is housing advocates come in with, everybody has their own thing. And that is a recipe for disaster. So everybody coming in with 2-3 things per session that could work is really, I think, the best strategy. And that gives good direction to Senator Rahman, Senator Marx, instead of everybody kind of pulling everybody apart, all well-meaning people, but you can't do 20 things. You could only do maybe 2-3 things. And that's why that's important. So, but have those relationships with the legislators and get those YIMBY people out there, because they are there. We need to engage them.
Well, thank you for that sage advice. And it is the bewitching 1 o'clock hour. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Mendi, Paca, our panelists, Senators Duff, Rahman, and Marx, our audience, our sponsor, the Fairfield County Center for Housing Opportunity, which is a collective impact partnership of the Housing Collective, the Partnership for Strong Communities, Local Initiatives Support Corporation, Fairfield County's Community Foundation, and the Regional Plan Association, as we all work together to deliver safe, equitable, affordable housing solutions for families and individuals across Connecticut. Please register for our February 19th conversation on how to advocate during 2025 session. And thank you all, senators, for your sage advice on how we can do a better job. And please register for subscribe to our newsletter to stay on top of all of our activities. That link can be in the chat. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our senators and to Mendi Paca for taking the time out of their day, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to joining us for this important, thoughtful, and meaningful conversation. Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.